The morning my ex showed up at my best friend's engagement party, I was standing next to the shrimp cocktail table, trying to look like someone who had her life together. I didn't. My savings account had $340 in it. My car needed new brake pads. The lease on my flower shop, the one I'd sunk 4 years and every dollar I had into, was up for renewal in 6 weeks, and my landlord had just informed me, very politely, that the new rate would be $800 more per month than what I was currently paying. $800. Like he'd just asked me to pass the salt. But I was there, in my green wrap dress that I'd bought on sale 2 years ago, and kept for important occasions, holding a glass of Prosecco I hadn't touched, smiling at people I barely knew. Because my best friend Gwen was getting engaged and I loved her, and I was not going to ruin her night by falling apart near the appetizers. That's when I saw him, my ex. 4 years of my life, walking through the front door of the Hargrove Hotel ballroom like he owned the place, which, knowing him, he probably wished he did. His name was Todd. I'll let you sit with that for a second. Todd. The man I'd reorganized my entire future around was named Todd, and he was wearing a blazer that cost more than my rent. And he had a woman on his arm who looked like she'd stepped directly out of a Nordstrom catalog. I turned back to the shrimp. Gwen hadn't told me he'd be here. I found out later that she hadn't known. Todd was the +1 of some colleague of her fiancé's, a last-minute addition to the guest list. One of those terrible coincidences that the universe serves up just to see what you're made of. What I was made of, apparently, was the ability to eat 4 shrimp cocktails in under 2 minutes, while pretending to be very interested in the centerpiece. I didn't want to leave. Gwen would notice, and she'd feel terrible, and it was her night. So I did what any reasonable woman in my position would do. I found the most out-of-the-way corner of the room, positioned myself behind a large floral arrangement, one I hadn't made, which stung a little, and I stayed very, very still. It worked for about 20 minutes. Then I heard his voice. Ren? Ren Calloway? I closed my eyes for exactly 1 second. Then I turned around. Todd looked the same. That was somehow the worst part. The same square jaw, the same slightly too confident smile, the same way of saying my name like it was a mild surprise, like running into me was a funny coincidence rather than a direct assault on my nervous system. Todd, I said, very calm, very normal, absolutely nothing happening inside my chest. Wow. He did this thing he used to do, where he looked me up and down in a way that was technically a compliment, but always made me feel like I was being evaluated. You look great. What are you doing here? Gwen is my best friend, I said. Right. He nodded like he'd forgotten that, which meant he definitely hadn't forgotten that. Still doing the flower thing? The flower thing. I own a shop, I said. Petal and Pine. We've been in the Riverside district for 4 years. Oh, nice. The tone in his voice said. Cute little hobby. I'm in commercial real estate now. Just closed on a portfolio in the arts district, actually. 12 properties. He paused to let that land. You should see the office space. You'd love it. Very artisanal. Artisanal. He said it the way people say artisanal when they mean small and struggling and kind of sad. His date appeared at his elbow. She was beautiful in a way that required significant maintenance. Perfect nails, perfect blowout smile that arrived before the rest of her face caught up. This is Courtney, Todd said. Courtney, this is Ren. We used to date. 3.5 years reduced to those 3 words, delivered with the same energy as mentioning a restaurant he'd once tried. How fun, Courtney said, in a voice that suggested it was not fun at all. I smiled. I don't know what the smile looked like from the outside. From the inside, it felt like something I'd assembled from spare parts. Congratulations on the portfolio, I said. And then, because I am a grown woman, and not a person who stands near floral arrangements feeling small. Excuse me. I walked away. I found the bar. I ordered a club soda, because I needed to keep my head clear, and I stood there with my back very straight, and I did not cry, and I did not call my mother. And I told myself that the burning behind my eyes was probably just the lighting. You look like someone just told you the fish is off. The voice came from my left. Low, unhurried, slightly amused. I turned. The man standing next to me at the bar was not anyone I recognized. He was tall, the kind of tall that you notice, in a dark suit that had clearly not come off a rack anywhere. Dark hair, sharp features, the kind of face that wasn't exactly handsome in a traditional way, but had something else to it, something that made you look twice, and then look again. He was watching me with mild interest, like I was a puzzle he wasn't in any particular hurry to solve. "I'm fine," I said. "I didn't ask if you were fine." I looked at him. "You compared me to someone who'd just heard about bad fish." "Fish is serious," he said. "A bad fish situation can ruin an entire evening." I almost laughed. I didn't want to, but it almost happened anyway. "I'm Ren," I said. "I know." He picked up his glass. Whiskey, neat, untouched. "You own the flower shop on Cortlandt. Petal and Pine." I stared at him. "How do you know that?" "Your friend talked about you for 20 minutes before you arrived. She's very proud of you." He said it simply, like it was just information. "I'm Beckett." He paused. Garrison Beckett. The name snagged on something in the back of my mind. Beckett. I'd heard that name somewhere, in the context of, what? Business news? My landlord had mentioned something about the Riverside district being bought up by the development group, I said. Beckett Group. He didn't confirm it, exactly. He just looked at me with that same calm, assessing expression. "You own half the buildings on my street," I said. "A few," he said. I didn't know what to do with that. I turned back to the bar. He didn't leave. "The man you were talking to," he said after a moment. "He's an idiot. You don't know him. He called your business the flower thing. He said it without heat, just as a fact. That's an idiot." I wrapped both hands around my club soda. "He's my ex." "I know that too. Your friend mentioned him also, less fondly. Gwen." I was going to have a very long conversation with Gwen about what she apparently shared with strangers at her own engagement party. "She said you gave up a marketing job to start the shop," Beckett said. "She said you built the refrigeration unit yourself when the installer canceled 2 days before opening." "I watched 6 YouTube videos," I said. "It was mostly zip ties and hope." "It's still running? 4 years later." He looked at me then. Really looked, in a way that was completely different from the way Todd had looked at me. Not assessing, not comparing me against some imagined better version of myself. Just looking. "Then you're better at zip ties than most people are at everything," he said. I didn't know what to say to that. I was quiet for a moment, and he was quiet too, and it wasn't uncomfortable the way silences with strangers usually are. Then Todd appeared. I felt him before I saw him. That particular shift in the air that happens when someone is walking toward you with the full intention of being witnessed walking toward you. Ren. He materialized on my right, glancing between me and Beckett with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of a man who had been perfectly content to dismiss me, until he noticed someone else wasn't dismissing me. "Didn't know you knew the Beckett crowd." Beckett crowd. He said it like it was a social set he was just barely not a member of. "We were just talking," I said. "Garrison." Todd extended his hand with a confidence that I recognized as performed. "Todd Mercer. I'm in commercial real estate. Actually, we might have some overlapping interests in this arts district." Beckett looked at the hand for a moment. Then he shook it, briefly, the way you shake a hand when you're doing the person a courtesy, rather than because you're pleased to meet them. "Mercer," he said. Nothing else. Todd laughed, the hollow laugh of someone who expected more. "Ren and I go way back." "Small world, right?" "Seems like it," Beckett said. "You should join us, actually. Courtney and I are sitting with the Alderton group. Great people, you'd know them." "I'm good here," Beckett said. Just that. No explanation, no apology, no social softening. 3 words delivered with complete indifference, and something in Todd's expression shifted. Some small rearrangement of his certainty about how important he was. He recovered quickly. That was always one of Todd's skills. Well, he turned back to me and I saw it, the exact moment he decided to reclaim ground. "Ren, we should grab coffee sometime. It'd be good to catch up properly. You can tell me how the shop is going." He smiled the smile that once worked on me. "I might actually know some people who could help with, scaling up if you're at that point." Scaling up. If you're at that point. I felt the familiar pull, the old muscle memory of being grateful for his attention, of softening under the implication that I needed help, that he had something I didn't. Then Beckett spoke. "She's at that point," he said. Quiet, certain, no room in it for debate. He said it like he was correcting an incorrect fact. Actually, I've been thinking about the Riverside district. The right anchor tenant on that block would change the whole character of it. He said it casually, still looking at his drink. A flower shop with 4 years of neighborhood presence is worth more than most people realize. I turned to look at him. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Todd, with an expression of complete boredom. Like Todd was a minor bureaucratic inconvenience. I didn't know you were interested in retail anchoring, Todd said carefully. There's a lot you don't know, Beckett said. He finally picked up his whiskey and drank. Nice meeting you, Mercer. Todd left. I watched him go and I registered, distantly, the way you register weather, that I felt nothing. Not triumph, not grief. Just the strange lightness of a weight you didn't realize you were carrying until someone helped you set it down. I turned to Beckett. You didn't have to do that, I said. I know. Were you serious? About the Riverside district? He looked at me then, and something in his expression shifted. The bored certainty gave way to something more careful, more honest. I'm serious about most things, he said. I didn't know what that meant. I decided to file it. Thank you, I said, for whatever that was. He was trying to make you feel small, Beckett said. It's a particular kind of contemptible, doing that at someone else's engagement party. He does it everywhere, I said before I could stop myself. Used to, he used to. Beckett was quiet for a moment. Why did you stay? It wasn't a judgment. It was a question, the same way you'd ask why a road goes the long way around. I thought he was right about me, I said. For a while? And now? I built a refrigeration unit out of zip ties, and it's been running for 4 years, I said. He smiled then. Really smiled. Not the controlled, calibrated thing he'd been doing before, but something actual and unguarded. It changed his whole face. Right, he said. We talked for another hour. I don't know how it happened. 1 minute we were at the bar, and then we were in the chairs by the windows overlooking the city. And I was telling him about the morning I'd opened the shop for the first time and dropped the key in the storm drain outside. And he was telling me about the building he'd bought at 26 that everyone told him was a money pit and turned out to be the foundation of everything. We were very different people, clearly, from very different circumstances. He spoke precisely and moved carefully, and had the air of someone who never said more than he meant to. I talk too much when I'm nervous, and I'd once sent a client a birthday arrangement with a condolence card attached by mistake. But there was something there. I don't know how else to say it. Something in the way he listened, not waiting for his turn to talk, actually listening. That felt unfamiliar in a way I couldn't place for a while. Then I placed it. Todd had never listened to me like that. The party wound down around 11. Gwen caught my eye from across the room and gave me a look that contained approximately 40 questions. I gave her a look back that said, tomorrow. Beckett walked me out. We stood on the sidewalk outside the Hargrove while the valets moved cars around us, and I was thinking about the brake pads and the lease and the $340, and all the perfectly practical reasons why I needed to focus on my actual life. And then he said, have dinner with me. I looked up at him. The hotel lights caught the edge of his jaw. He looked serious, the way he'd looked serious all evening. But underneath it, there was something I hadn't seen before. Something careful and almost uncertain, like the question cost him something. You own buildings on my street, I said. I know. That's complicated. Most things worth anything are. He held my gaze. Dinner. Not the Riverside lease, not real estate, just dinner. I thought about Todd's face when Beckett had said, she's at that point. The way he'd said it like it was simply true, like there was no version of reality in which it was otherwise. Okay, I said. His expression didn't change dramatically. He just looked at me, and something in him settled like a question had been answered. Saturday, he said. I'll call you. I didn't give you my number. Gwen will. He said it with complete certainty. He wasn't wrong. He called on Friday, not Saturday, which I decided meant something, though I couldn't have said exactly what. We had dinner at a small Italian place in the warehouse district that had no sign on the door, and the best cacio e pepe I'd ever put in my mouth. We argued about whether Chicago or New York had better architecture. I said Chicago, obviously, and he agreed, which was not the answer I expected from someone who had the Manhattan address on his business card. We split a tiramisu. He told me about his father, who'd built the company from a single property management contract and died before he could see what it became. I told him about my grandmother, who had owned a flower stall in the Fulton Market for 30 years, and who had taken me to it every Saturday and taught me that cut flowers need clean water and sharp cuts to last. That the things that seem small are always the things that matter. She sounds like she was remarkable, he said. She would have made fun of you, I said. She called everyone in a suit one of those. What did that mean? She didn't entirely trust people who didn't have dirt under their fingernails. I looked at his hands across the table. No offense. A taken. He turned his hands over, looking at them too. I've done enough demo work on job sites to understand the category. I'm just very good at washing up. I laughed. He smiled. It happened again. That unguarded thing that changed his face. Things moved slowly after that, deliberately. He was not the kind of person who rushed, and I was the kind of person who had learned, the hard way, not to mistake momentum for meaning. We had dinner again, and then again. He came to the shop once on a Thursday afternoon and stood in the back room where I was prepping a funeral arrangement and didn't say anything useful, but also didn't get in the way, which is more than I can say for most people. You don't have to be here, I told him. I know, he said. He picked up a stem of eucalyptus and turned it over in his hands with genuine interest, which is not an expression I'm used to seeing from people observing me strip leaves off stems. About 2 months in, my landlord called. I'd been bracing for it. The new lease rate, the negotiation I didn't have leverage for, the very real possibility that I was going to lose the location I'd spent 4 years building my entire customer base around. I had a number in my head. I had a backup plan that I didn't love. I sat down at my workbench with a pad of paper and I listened. The rate increase, he said, was being revised, not eliminated. Revised. Significantly downward from the number he'd floated before. More than manageable, more than fair. I didn't understand. I found out later, because Gwen told me, because Gwen knew everything eventually. Beckett had renegotiated the building's master lease. Nothing about my shop specifically. Nothing that looked like interference. Just routine portfolio management that happened to change the math for every tenant on the block. I confronted him about it. You restructured my landlord's lease, I said. We were on the phone. I was standing in the walk-in cooler because I needed the cold air. Silence. Then, I restructured a lease for a building in my portfolio. Beckett. The numbers made sense, he said. It was the right move for the property. Did you do it because of me? A pause. The numbers made sense, he said again, but the pause had already answered. I stood in the walk-in cooler for a long time after we hung up. I thought about Gwen saying I should be furious. I thought about the part of me that was furious. The part that had built everything herself. That had crawled through every lean month on stubbornness and YouTube videos and zip ties. That did not want to be someone who needed saving. Then I thought about the fact that he hadn't told me. He'd done it quietly, without announcing it, without expecting gratitude. He hadn't offered to fix my problem. He'd fixed it and said nothing, because he knew I didn't want it to be about that. That was different, I thought. That was something I didn't have a blueprint for. I called him back. I'm still annoyed, I said, when he picked up. I know, he said. You should have asked me. Yes, he said. Just that. No defense, no explanation. But thank you, I said, even though you were wrong about how to do it. Okay, he said. There was something in the word. Some very small, very quiet thing. Come for dinner, I said. I'll cook. Another pause. You cook? I'm from Chicago. Of course I cook. I leaned against the cooler shelves. Saturday. 7. I'll bring wine. Good. And Beckett? I waited. Next time, just tell me. Next time I'll tell you, he said. There was a next time. There were a lot of next times. There were Sunday mornings with coffee, and the times spread across my kitchen table. There were arguments about the right way to poach an egg. He was wrong, and I told him so, and he made his version anyway, and it was admittedly fine. There were the hard nights, the ones that every new year brings. The February when 2 of my biggest wholesale accounts went under and I had to rebuild my client base in 90 days, and he sat across from me while I worked through the numbers and didn't offer to fix it, and didn't leave. There was the morning. I found out my grandmother's old flower stall in the Fulton Market was being sold and cried in my car for 20 minutes before I could go inside. And he drove over without my asking. And he sat in the passenger seat while I cried. And he didn't say anything stupid. That was when I knew. Not the lease, not the dinner, not the way he'd looked at Todd with complete indifference, like Todd was an inconvenient footnote. It was that morning in my car when he just sat there. Because sometimes sitting there is the whole thing. A year and a half after the engagement party, my own shop was in the black enough that I hired 2 people. I'd gotten a wholesale account with one of the downtown hotels. A contract that took me 6 months of relationship building, and one very elaborate proposal that I stayed up 4 nights putting together. The morning the contract came through, I stood in the shop with the email open on my phone, and I cried again. The good kind this time. The kind that means you've been holding something for so long, you forgot you were holding it. Beckett sent flowers. That sounds like a joke. A real estate developer sending flowers to a flower shop owner. But they were from a small farm up in Wisconsin that I'd been sourcing from and mentioned to him once in passing. And the note said, "You built this. No zip ties this time." I kept the note. Todd, as far as I know, is still in commercial real estate. I ran into someone who'd worked with him once. At a farmer's market, of all places, between the heirloom tomatoes and the infused honey. And she mentioned he'd pivoted to residential and was struggling with the market. I said something like, "That's too bad," which was not entirely sincere, but was the socially appropriate response. Gwen's married now. Her daughter is 7 months old and has her father's ears and her mother's opinions, which means she arrived in the world with a lot to say. I made the flowers for the wedding. White peonies and garden roses and eucalyptus, all of it loose and unstructured, the way Gwen likes things. Beckett stood next to me during the ceremony and held my hand, and when I cried, which I did, at the vows, because I always cry at vows, he passed me a handkerchief from his jacket pocket that I did not know he had, which tells you everything about him, really. He asked me to move in with him on a Tuesday in March. Not at dinner, not on a rooftop, not with any production attached. He was in my kitchen, helping me make soup, because I'd been sick for 3 days, and he said, "I want you to move in with me." I looked up from the counter. "We'd have to figure out what to do about the shop being over here and you potentially being over there," I said. "I've been thinking about it," he said. "I own a building 4 blocks from Petal and Pine. Empty ground floor, good light." I stared at him. "I'm not offering to give it to you," he said, before I could respond. "I'm offering to rent it to you at fair market rate. And then I'm asking you to move in with me because I'd like to see you every day instead of most days. Those are 2 separate things. They were 2 separate things." I said yes to both. The new space opened in the spring, larger than the original, with the big east-facing windows I'd always dreamed of, the kind that make cut flowers look like they're glowing from the inside. I kept the name. The day we moved in, I brought a single stem of eucalyptus and put it in a jar on the workbench. The same kind my grandmother used to keep near her register. And I stood there in the morning light and thought about how the things that seem small are always the things that matter. Clean water, sharp cuts, the right person in the room, quiet enough to let you be exactly who you are. That winter, I found out I was pregnant. I took 4 tests over the course of one extremely stressful Tuesday morning. Then, I sat at the kitchen table with all 4 tests lined up in front of me like evidence and waited for Beckett to come home. He came through the door at 6. He saw my face, and he put down his bag, and he came to the table, and he looked at the tests. A long moment. Then he sat down across from me, and he took both my hands in his, and he said, "Okay, just that." Calm, steady, already decided. "Okay," I said back. We named her June, for the month she was born, and for the feeling of it, warmth and open windows and something beginning. She has her father's patience and my grandmother's opinions, which means she arrived in the world with something to say, and the temperance to wait for the right moment to say it. I still run the shop. I still lose sleep over wholesale accounts and refrigeration units, and whether the ranunculus order will clear customs in time for the spring weddings. Some things don't change, but I stand in the shop in the mornings now, June in the carrier on my chest, eucalyptus smell in the air, And I think about the version of me that stood next to the shrimp cocktail table in a green wrap dress, feeling like the least important person in the room. I want to tell her, just wait. Not because someone is coming to rescue you. No one is coming to rescue you. That is not the story. The story is that you are already more than you know, and the right person, when they come, will not try to tell you what you're worth. They'll just stand next to you while you figure it out yourself, with a handkerchief in their pocket and absolutely nothing to prove. That's the whole thing. That's always been the whole thing.